G'day, Chief. Welcome to the Chief podcast and this special episode, which we call The Mini Chief. These are short, sharp highlights from our fabulous CEO guests, where you get a 5 to 10 minute snapshot of the highlights from their episode. Righto, Chief. Without further ado, here is the Mini Chief episode for this week with Nicolette Rubinsztein AM, professional board member and author. You've written this magic book called Not Guilty, and I'd like to spend quite a bit of time talking about this because the opening line of your book says, as most working mums will confirm, guilt can be a pretty constant companion. Can you elaborate on this and explain perhaps why this is such a much bigger problem now than, in previous times or earlier times?
For our generation, we were really taught the world is your oyster, go off and do whatever you want. And I think many of us did. And then it comes to the having children bit and you realize, oh my goodness, having a career and being a mother is actually really hard. And no one really told me about how you could do both of these things. And I think the guilt comes from it's guilt from a work point of view because you worry that you're not delivering 100%. And it's guilt from a mother point of view that you feel guilty that you're not being the best mum possible. So, it really is guilt on all fronts if you're not careful.
And in your book, you use this magnificent McKinsey framework called 7S. And I'd like to go through some of these. And then this is about setting yourself up for success as a working mum. And the 7S framework has shared values as a core element in the middle, and then structure, style, skills, strategy, staff, and systems around the outside. Let's talk a bit about some of these because this is really, really important. You talk about how shared values are about getting on the same page and about what is most important to you and to your family and with your partner. When you're setting yourself up as a working mum, and let's be honest, this has got nothing more to do with just working mums. If you're married and you're a husband in the partnership, then this is just as important for you to think about, which is working out the values that you and your partner have so you can have a successful career. What are some of the values that need to be discussed so you can get on the same page? What are some examples of that?
I think the most important one is around the childcare and what role each of you is going to play in the childcare. And I'm really passionate that you have to have an explicit conversation about that. I think the best way to start is from the child's point of view and what percentage of that child's time do you want that child to be with a parent as opposed to in some sort of care, and then working out how each of you can contribute to that. And I think it's important to think about the research in this area. And the research pretty much says time with the parent is fantastic. And it also says time at preschool is fantastic. And schooling is obviously a given. Where it gets quite muddy is the daycare for really young children. I think that's where we have to be quite careful about, how much care we put our children in.
And do you have any guidelines around that would be good for people, or is it best for them to conduct a bit of their own research and work that out?
Yeah, I think everyone does have to work out their own solution to that. And because the research is quite muddy, different people's situations and different children will actually react differently. But my personal opinion is that you would want more than half of your child's waking life to be with a parent. So from my point of view, I think in those early years, before age 4, that you should probably try and limit it to 3 days of care.
Yep.
And, if I think about what the ultimate model would be, actually, it would be where both parents work flexibly and part-time. And if you both do the equivalent of about 4 days a week, it means that your child will only be in 3 days of care a week. 4 days of work, you can usually do, a job in 4 days, particularly if you make up a bit of time on weekends and that sort of thing. So, I actually think that that's a bit of a win-win situation. And I have seen more and more people doing that, more and more couples doing that kind of model.
There's a particular part of your book where you almost talk about certain phases or chapters in your life where, particularly in your early years, it's all about being a professional and growing your career. And then you go into this period where you've got to raise your kids. When you go part-time, and you might have to just sacrifice a little bit of the rocketing up the career chart. But what I've found is that thinking about, instead of just thinking about right now, but expanding, you just see your entire career and your entire life, takes a bit of the pressure away from having to achieve right now. Is that something you found as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned a lot from my mom from this point of view. So my mom was a stay-at-home mum until her early 40s. So she raised 4 children, and she ended up setting up her own insurance broking business when she was about 42. She's still running it, and she's 75. So wow. She started a brand new career in her 40s, and that career has spanned, more than 30 years. So she is a great example of focusing on one thing more than another at different phases of your life. And, these days, particularly my work as an actuary, I get to think a lot about what you do in retirement and what your retirement age is and all of that sort of thing. Basically, our increasing longevity means that many of us will be working well into our 70s. So this concept of trying to cram in all the achievement and the career success, I really think that we have to rethink that. In my case, I think when I look back, I think I've effectively put my career on hold probably for about 10 years while I was having children. And I've been working flexibly for the last 15 years. But in particular, I sort of ratcheted down the hours for that 10-year period. And, I feel really good about that decision. It was fantastic. And, now my kids are a bit older, I'm just starting to ramp things back up again.
I think this is such an important thing to work out with your partner because, life gets so busy, so chaotic. And if you haven't had the discussion to say, well, how are we going to raise these kids? What are our values? What percentage of time should they be in daycare? Who's going to do what role in this whole scheme to make this happen? What are our parenting rules? What kind of holidays we're going to have? All these kind of things are really important conversations because when they're not had, it's almost like each individual assumes that their angle is almost in play. And what that means is there's a huge opportunity for friction and misunderstanding in the relationship.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I really think that your values come so much more apparent when you have children. And it's quite easy to operate, in sort of parallel universes before you have children. Things become much more apparent. And it is all of those things. It's about how much pocket money. It's about relationship with money. It's about punishment. It's about what values you're going to raise your children with. What do you want them to have out of life? It's about bedtimes. It's all of those things that you've probably never had a question about before.
Yeah. One of the great things about your book is that you've listed a whole bunch of things you should have a discussion about. So if you're not sure about what you want to have a discussion with your partner about, just go and get the book because it'll be there for you to have a read about and then have a really good discussion with your partner. Now, listen, there's a great quote that you mentioned, which is from Quentin Bryce, the former Governor General of Australia, and she says this: "For a long time now, I've been saying to women, you can have it all, but not all at the same time." Can you expand on that in more depth?
Yeah, I really think it's difficult to, let's take the extreme example, be a CEO and have small children all at the same time. And that means really being clear about what your goals are and what's important to you at each stage of your life. And as I said, I was very clear that particularly when my children were young, that they were my number one priority and work was my second priority. And, I've got a background in strategy. So strategy at the end of the day is all about making trade-offs. You have to work out, what your number one priority is and what the other priorities are, because invariably you've got limited resources and you can't do everything.
Chief, there you have it for this week with our mini Chief episode. You can get all the links and resources, including how to connect with Nicolette, by going to chiefmaker.com/367. Chief, do you need to get the right people in the right roles or have some tricky individuals whom you're just not sure how to develop and grow? We have the ultimate resource for you. Go to chiefmaker.com/performance and we have a tool there where you can systemize your performance assessment, work out the right moves to develop and grow and get people moving once again. Check it out at chiefmaker.com/performance. chiefmakers.com/performance. And if you would like to stay in touch and hear all about some of the best resources you can find anywhere in the world to improve your performance at work, go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chiefs, as always, remember to stay epic.